Hello, and welcome to this first lecture of a new section on experiments planning and conversion testing in this course on excellence in digital marketing. So, in this new module, what we're going to give you is some good in-depth understanding of how can you plan experiments and test conversions to gain excellence in digital marketing. Digital marketing specifically has multiple facets, much more than a normal marketing. It has many vehicles that you can use, and in that, to determine what is best, one of the good way is to plan experiments and test the conversions on variety of media, variety of platforms, variety of messages to see what works best for you. So that's what we will do in this module. In this end of this lecture, particularly, we will talk about what is this planning of experiments and how to plan experiments, basically. And then the next we will talk about the conversion testing. So, any thoughts on what is planning experiments? You all of must have done experimentation in your schools on science lab. So, what is this planning experimentation? This planning of experimentation comes from the Taguchi design of experiments in Six Sigma process and techniques. In the design process, one of the things that is required is to produce a best combination of inputs that will produce the required output. And so is required for your digital marketing. So there are many factors, many input variables that must be taken into consideration while making a product or an output that you want in digital marketing, and in design specifically a product. So this method was innovated by Taguchi, a Japanese scientist, management scientist, who had this structured approach to determining the best combination of the input variables to produce a product or a service. And based on this design of experiment methodology to determine the parameter levels of the various, what are the inputs and what should be the parameter levels of those to determine the best output. It is an important tool for designing processes and product. It's a method for quantitatively identifying the right inputs, not only qualitative, but quantitatively the inputs as well as the parameter level for making the high quality products and decision. And this leads to a robust design output, as we see, and produces a design perspective which is quite robust. And the same product design principle can be applied to determining the right inputs for producing an output on digital marketing. Let's talk about the basics of DOE. It's a powerful statistical tool for improving process and product design and solving process and production problems or identifying and capitalizing on an opportunity. In the design of experiment process, you make controlled changes in the input variable in order to gain maximum amount of information on the cause and effect relationship in a minimum sample size. So you have certain output. Let's say your output is obviously a conversion, right? So you know there are six things that can affect that possible conversion. And in a control experimentation in a sample, you make changes in one of them and see the impact on your conversion. And like this, you keep going at different levels and you determine one by one what is the optimal level of input that's needed. When analyzing a process, experiments are more often used to evaluate which process inputs have a significant impact on the process output and what is the target level of input that should be achieved to reach a certain level of output. Uh, this method of the DOE is also called designed experiment or experimental designs. So, how to plan design of experiments or how to plan experiments? Any thoughts? So it has to start with defining a problem or defining an opportunity, and then you, based on the defining the problem, you figure out, identify the objectives or the output that you need to achieve. And in this case, we are saying we need to maximize conversion or maximize traffic, and based on those objectives, then you determine what are the possible, list down the factors that will make that happen. So it's all the famous equation y is an output is a function of x1 to xn. So you determine the y first in the second step, and then you determine the various inputs that are required. Once you have determined the various factors that are, you plan the experiments on a very controlled manner, one by one. And then you run the experiments and you have data, you analyze the data, and you come to conclusion on what are the parameters, that what are the inputs that have maximum impact on the output, and what are the optimal level of parameters on those inputs. So that's how you plan the experiment. Let's look at a little more of this. So we start, as we are saying, we start by defining what is the problem we are trying to solve. And there, in that problem, there is a certain output. Let's call that a top matrix, a Y. Then you decide where you go to run that out experiment. What are the changes that you want in the Y? If your conversion right now is 10% and you have a target to achieve 20%, then that becomes a proposed change. Based on a proposed change, that you look at what is the hypothesis, like what changes in what changes do you need, what factors would determine that output change, and what are the secondary matrices that you need, and then you set certain target levels either in isolation in a very controlled way or in combination, and you run the experiments. So based on your knowledge of what is the top metrics that you want to change to, from where to what, and what inputs drive, what is the levels that you are possibly going to test them, and then you run the experiment and see that. So what do we do next? In the next, what we do is we look at what is conversion testing. What is conversion testing? What is the conversion rate? And we look at how can we will take a much greater look at that in the next lecture. So thank you so much for watching this lecture. I hope you continue to learn something new, continue to enjoy, and I look forward to see you again in the next lecture.